Have you ever wondered why the silent compromises you make, the ones you pretend don't matter, slowly hollow out your spirit more than outright rejection ever could? Why is it that people often tolerate the very poisons that drain them, yet fight desperately to hold on to illusions of love, loyalty, or stability? Jung revealed that what weakens a soul is not absence, but the weight of tolerated shadows. The truth is not hidden in what you chase, but in what you refuse to release. Tonight, you will discover 10 hidden forces that must be eliminated without announcement, for freedom comes not in the noise of addition, but in the quiet courage of subtraction. 1. The addiction to external validation. Why does she starve when her body is full, yet still hunger for the look in another's eyes? Why does a woman's worth crumble when silence replaces applause? This is the tragedy of external validation, the heart that cannot hear its own pulse unless echoed in another's voice. The conflict lies in craving to be seen while betraying oneself to be palatable. Many chase admiration, not realizing that every gaze they live for carves away another piece of their authenticity. Like a mask worn too long, their true face is forgotten. The consequence of such unawareness is enslavement to inconsistency. One day, affection is given freely, the next it is withheld, and a woman's sense of value rises and falls like a leaf in someone else's wind. This cycle breeds people-pleasing, self-erasure, and endless pursuit of men or relationships that feed off her fragility. What must be eliminated here is not visibility, but dependency on being chosen. Jung taught that the unlived life within cries out the loudest. The woman who silences her own voice in exchange for external applause becomes a ghost of herself. Liberation begins when she turns validation inward, when she decides that her applause must first echo from within before it can resonate with the world. Picture the goddess Artemis, wild and untamed, hunting beneath the moonlight. She needed no court, no audience, no approval. Her own existence was temple enough. To embody Artemis is to recognize that worth is not bestowed at all. It radiates, and others either align or are blinded in its presence. Now imagine standing before a mirror, not the surface reflection, but the mirror you've avoided, the one that asks, "Why do I need them to see me before I see myself?" Stay with that question until the hunger shifts into sovereignty. You become magnetic the moment you stop begging to matter. And as one poison fades, another more insidious waits, the silent bonds of guilt that shackle the soul. That is what comes next. 2. Guilt shackles masquerading as love. Why do women carry the weight of guilt for walking away when the other carried none for breaking them? Why does guilt whisper that caretaking, overgiving, and self-abandoning is proof of love? This is the spell of misplaced sacrifice. The inner battle emerges when love is confused with debt. She stays because leaving feels cruel, even though staying is self-betrayal. She apologizes for having boundaries, as if protecting one's soul is a sin. This is not compassion. It is conditioning born from centuries of archetypal distortion, the nurturer turned martyr. Unawareness of this dynamic corrodes silently. She feels trapped in half-lived relationships, silenced careers, unspoken dreams. Chains of should keep her serving others while her own aspirations rot. The shadow here is not selfishness, but the terror of reclaiming the right to prioritize herself. Jung would say that what is repressed returns with vengeance. The guilt-driven woman projects her caged spirit onto partners, expecting them to set her free, yet none can. Worse, resentment grows, guilt's twin flame, until tenderness is replaced by quiet bitterness. The solution is radical individuation, cutting the chain of guilt by remembering that authentic love does not demand one's self-erosion. True feminine sovereignty is not found in endless giving, but in discerning where her fire warms and where it is being extinguished. Think of Persephone, who once was dragged into the underworld, yet later chose to descend and rise by her own will. Guilt made her prisoner, but choice made her queen. The moment a woman chooses without apology, the moment she decides her life is hers to claim, guilt becomes powerless. Visualize this. Picture a heavy cloak draped over your shoulders, soaked and suffocating. Now imagine slipping it to the ground, walking away unburdened. That cloak is false guilt. It was never yours to wear. The moment you stop apologizing for existing as you are, you step into a kingdom no one can take from you. But after guilt, something darker still lingers. The toxic loyalties that suffocate growth, masquerading as bonds of honor. And it is this illusion we unravel next. 3. The weight of toxic loyalties. Why do women honor bonds that destroy them long after the thread has rotted away? Why is silence mistaken for loyalty and suffering mistaken for strength? This is the hidden curse of toxic allegiance, when devotion is bound not by love, but by chains of fear and obligation. The conflict appears when loyalty is praised even in dysfunction. She remains faithful to friends who drain her spirit, lovers who dishonor her trust, or family members who weaponize her empathy. Society calls it noble, but it is merely self-betrayal dressed as virtue. She confuses endurance with worth, and every time she stays in a place where her soul wilts, she whispers to herself that pain must be proof of strength. But the consequences are merciless. Toxic loyalty robs her of time, vitality, and clarity. While she guards someone else's crumbling throne, her own kingdom collapses. While she protects a relationship that feeds only on her patience, her own joy dims into shadows. Jung spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted. Here, the mask is loyal woman, yet beneath it is the quiet scream of neglect. Awareness demands a fierce awakening. Not every bond deserves to survive. Just because someone once gave warmth does not mean you must keep walking into their fire when it now burns you. Individuation, Jung's path to wholeness, requires shedding the parasitic attachments that thrive only when you shrink. Elimination here is not betrayal. It is reclamation. Think of the warrior Athena, bound not by misplaced emotion, but by strategy, by the discipline to discern loyalty worth keeping from alliances that corrupt. Real sovereignty demands the courage to break ranks with what bleeds you dry. Imagine a rope tied around your waist, pulling you backward toward an abyss. Now see yourself lifting a blade, slicing the cord, and stepping forward with nothing attached but your own strength. That is what it feels like when false loyalties finally fall away. She who keeps loyalty to her own soul need never fear betrayal. But once toxic loyalties have been cut, another phantom arises, the quiet curse of procrastination, not laziness, but fear disguised as waiting. And this is the shadow you must face next. 4. The poison of endless delay. Why does a woman with vision see her life in vivid colors, yet still postpone the very step that would set her free? Why does she whisper someday until time itself becomes her captor? This is procrastination, not the surface excuse of laziness, but the deeper truth. Fear dressed in patience. The conflict arises from hidden perfectionism, the idea that she must be fully ready before beginning, flawless before stepping, loved before daring. Dreams remain untouched, not because she lacks capability, but because she drowns in the illusion of not yet. Jung would call it the shadow of self-doubt, the fractured archetype that convinces her that she lacks authority to claim her own destiny. Consequences cut deeper than wasted hours. Opportunities rot unclaimed, passion decays into regret, and the gap between who she is and who she could become stretches wider each year. Procrastination is the silent burial ground of unlived selves, those versions of her that never began, never spoke, never tried. The empowered solution demands a radical confrontation. Begin imperfectly. Move even while afraid. Jung's great truth was that wholeness never emerges from waiting for clarity. Clarity is born only after the first step is taken. To end procrastination, she must embrace the chaos of becoming and understand that delay is not safety, it is death by stillness. Consider the phoenix who does not wait for graceful permission to burn. It throws itself fearlessly into the fire, knowing that ash is not the end, but the doorway into rebirth. This is the path out of delay, to leap even when the ground beneath is uncertain. Visualize the unseen clock above your life, the hands spinning, each tick reminding you that tomorrow is a mirage. Now see your hand freeze the pendulum by declaring, "Now is the moment." That choice alone rewrites fate. The future belongs to the woman who refuses to wait another day for herself. But if delay is lethal, there is something even more venomous: the invasive voices of comparison that fracture identity from within. That journey begins in the truths that follow. 5. The disease of comparison. Why does a woman measure herself against fragments of others, as though her worth is an equation always missing a variable? Why does the scroll through another's highlight reel ignite an invisible war within her own body? This is the disease of comparison, an infection of the soul that feeds on fractured self-worth. The conflict lies in forgetting individuality. She sees another woman's success not as proof of possibility, but as evidence of her own inadequacy. Instead of perceiving different seasons of growth, she paints her own journey in shadows, jealous of blooms that grew in soil not her own. The Jungian archetype of the shadow manifests here, revealing that every time she envies another, she disowns the very qualities within herself longing to be expressed. Consequences strike deep: anxiety, insecurity, broken friendships, and wasted years chasing someone else's identity. Attraction itself becomes warped because when she compares her worth to another's, she unconsciously invites men to weigh her the same way. She lives in the prison of relativity, never grasping the kingdom of her own unique essence. The solution is the radical act of individuation, Jung's path to becoming self-whole. To eliminate comparison means to claim the truth that no archetype repeats itself. The maiden becomes queen, the lover becomes creator, the wild woman becomes mother of her own destiny. Each path unfolds according to its own axis of time, and to compare is to dishonor that sacred unfolding. Think of the oak tree and the lotus. One rises high to meet the heavens, one blossoms in waters still embrace. If the oak shames itself for not blooming like the lotus, it forgets that it shelters entire worlds beneath its branches. Individuation is remembrance. You're not meant to echo another design. Close your eyes and picture a stage where every performer is called by name. When your name is spoken, the light fixes only on you, and all that is expected is what only you can embody. That is the stage of destiny, and no one else can perform your role. Nothing destroys power faster than forgetting that no one can duplicate your essence. But once comparison is silenced, another toxin waits: the exile of suppressed emotions locked in cages of false strength. And that is where the next truth ignites. 6. The prison of suppressed emotions. Why are women told that their feelings are too heavy, too much, too irrational? Why are tears swallowed like poison, laughter muted like sin, and rage hidden like shame. This is the prison of suppressed emotions, where the very truths of the body are buried alive. The inner conflict grows when self-expression is equated with weakness. The archetype of the good woman tells her to be agreeable, calm, untouched by storms. She plays the stoic mask, even though within her roars a wild thunder. Yet what is denied within always returns through the back door. Suppressed rage becomes depression. Ignored sorrow hardens into numbness. Buried longing twists itself into anxiety. The consequences are devastating. Relationships decay because she cannot voice her needs. Attraction falters because unknowingly, men feel the dead weight of her unexpressed truth. Health itself withers, for the body becomes the graveyard of every unshed tear. Jung warned of the danger of repression. What is not lived consciously appears unconsciously, controlling fate while she believes she has control. The empowered solution is dangerous and divine, to liberate the voice of emotion and listen without judgment. Anger does not destroy. It signals boundaries. Grief is not weakness. It purges the weight of attachment. Longing does not shame. It reveals the path yet unlived. Individuation requires emotional truth, for only by integrating the wild and the wounded does she emerge whole. Picture the goddess Kali, dark and untamed, standing amidst flames and chaos. Men tremble at her fury, but her destruction clears space for creation anew. Suppressed emotion is this inner Kali. Fear her silence more than her roar. Visualize a locked chest deep within. Inside it lies everything you were forbidden to feel. Now imagine breaking it open, releasing its contents into air and flame, letting nothing remain hidden. That release is sovereignty. The woman who frees her sighs and screams, writes her own scripture of power. But after she shatters repression and comparison, a subtler shadow stalks the horizon, the seductive slavery of distraction, the endless noise that drowns her higher calling. That is the storm that awaits in the next unveiling. 7. The seduction of endless distraction. Why do women claim they want transformation, yet sink hours into small screens that siphon away their soul? Why do they bury silence beneath noise, scrolling and numbing, trying to hide from the whispers of their own shadow? This is the seduction of distraction, not the harmless pastime it appears, but the most subtle weapon against awakening. The conflict begins when the modern world sells noise as necessity. She believes she must always be reachable, always entertained, always stimulated. Yet beneath that restless motion lies the fear of stillness, the terror of meeting the parts of herself she has not yet faced. Jung taught that the unconscious will surface when silence allows it. To distract endlessly, then, is to ensure the unconscious remains unintegrated, leaving her vulnerable to the very drives that secretly govern her fate. The consequences of distraction are more lethal than wasted hours. They strip from her the ability to concentrate, to listen, to be present. Relationships corrode under constant digital attention. Ambitions vanish because true mastery demands focus, and she has given hers away to trivial consumption. Distraction, at its heart, is a quiet refusal to dwell in one's own depth. A refusal to turn inward is not harmless. It is a death of destiny by 1,000 meaningless cuts. The empowered path forward requires reclaiming the throne of attention. To cut out the poison means eliminating what numbs rather than nourishes, withdrawing life force from the trivial and redirecting it toward creation, purpose, silence, and truth. Individuation demands deep presence, for only in stillness do the unconscious patterns rise to be seen, healed, and transformed. She must create deliberate altars of silence, places where the phone is set aside, the screens fade, and the soul is free to speak. Imagine Odysseus bound to the mast, his sailor's ears sealed with wax to resist the deadly songs of the sirens. He knew the voices would come, trying to lure him toward ruin. So must she recognize that distraction is today's siren song, deceptive, seductive, and merciless if followed blindly. To survive, she must be bound not to her devices, but to her discipline. Visualize this. The room grows quiet, the screen goes black, and you sit face to face with the vast mirror of your own spirit. The silence feels unbearable at first, but then, slowly, something deeper rises, the voice you were always meant to hear. She who conquers distraction becomes unstoppable, for nothing can seduce the focused soul. But once distraction is eliminated, one last toxin remains, more corrosive than wasted time. The silent war of self-hatred, eroding her from within. And that shadow takes center stage now. 8. The shadow of self-contempt. Why does a woman whisper cruelty to herself that she would never dare speak to anyone she loves? Why does she gaze in the mirror not as a temple of becoming, but as a battlefield of shame? This is the shadow of self-contempt, the darkest poison of all, where the enemy is no longer outside, but within. The conflict is ancient, conditioned by comparison, wounded by rejection, scarred by unworthy attachment. A woman begins to believe she is insufficient at her very core. Self-contempt feeds on every past mistake, every wound unhealed, mutating her into her own executioner. She begins to overgive to prove worth, overperform to silence inadequacy, or overbear pain just to feel deserving of love. Jung's warning echoes here. What remains unconscious rules the life until it is faced as shadow. Self-hatred is the unintegrated shadow demanding attention. Consequences are devastating. Relationships collapse because nobody can convince her of what she refuses to believe about herself. Attraction dynamics deform, for the woman who despises herself unconsciously seeks men who echo her contempt, completing the cycle of rejection. Dreams are abandoned because she convinces herself she is not enough to claim them. The hatred within becomes prophecy fulfilled. The empowered solution is to turn that shadow into light, not by pretending to love false affirmations, but by confronting every inner wound with ruthless compassion. To eliminate self-contempt is to stop feeding it, to take each hateful phrase and burn it as untruth. To integrate shadow means recognizing that flaws are not curses, but raw material for individuation. The phoenix does not apologize for the ash it once was. It rises precisely because the ash is what gave it wings. Think of Psyche, whose trials nearly broke her, demanded labor after labor that no mortal should endure. Yet each challenge forged her into something greater. Self-contempt, when confronted, transforms into the very crucible of strength, no longer a weakness, but the raw fire of a future unshackled. Visualize this. Standing alone in darkness, hearing a voice whisper all the cruelties you once believed. Now imagine turning to see that voice belongs to a caged child, terrified, repeating what it once heard from others. You unlock the cage. You hold her. You no longer fight yourself. You integrate. And suddenly, the shadow dissolves. The woman who ends war with herself becomes untouchable, for no enemy outside can conquer a fortress already whole. But if each poison was cut away quietly, one truth grows louder. Elimination is not loss, but power, not subtraction, but return. And this ruthless purification continues beyond what you've seen tonight. The shadows still hold secrets waiting to be named. The poisons have been named. Validation, when sought outside, erodes the pulse of inner sovereignty. Guilt, masquerading as care, chains the spirit to false debts. Loyalty, when blind, decays into quiet self-slaughter. Delay, painted as patience, slowly embalms the unlived self. Comparison fractures identity, turning her essence into stolen mirrors. Suppressed emotions corrode the body, burying truth in silence. Distraction seduces destiny away from the altar of presence. And self-contempt, the darkest of all, drains the very blood of worth until she becomes enemy to herself. Each truth is a blade, to cut, to sever, to free. And so here you stand, on the edge of silence, where subtraction becomes sacred purification. Jung taught that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. These shadows you have seen are not chains, but invitations. Each one stripped away does not leave you with less, but with more. Power without apology, love without debt, loyalty without corruption, time without delay. To eliminate is to remember. To remember is to return. Close your eyes and let the thought sting. Every weakness you tolerated was never weakness at all. It was misplaced devotion. The moment you dare to end performance, end comparison, end shame, you awaken not as who you hope to become, but as who you always were. Your silence isn't emptiness. Your detachment isn't coldness. They are the beginning of your return to yourself. So enter deeper. Subscribe to Jung-mind, where your shadow speaks and your soul finally listens. And let this final question burn into your spirit long after the screen fades. What are you still protecting that was always meant to die?